Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Superman and Lois. A great episode, a lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Or first and foremost, there's the whole situation of Sam finding out about, wait, Jordan has powers now, and he's very upset because it's like, wait, you didn't tell me about it. It's like, also, it's like, for one, why do you need to know all the details about like what's going on in their family? It didn't come to that, but it is, I mean, I get your family and everything, but it's like, for him, it's like, you should have kind of let me know about this. The fact is that kid should be playing football with his abilities and stuff like that. And it's like, is this the reason why you moved to Smallville? And Lois is like, no, this isn't. Well, yes, it's partially, but it's obviously Sam having his own beliefs in Clark living his life the way it is. It's like, no, like, once again, it goes back to that thing of, you were too important, you know, in many different regards. Because obviously Lois has her issues with her dad, because it's not just the way he's barging in her life. It's like, this is my life to live. It's like, you've never been there for certain aspects of my life. Because even she was like, oh, you're here to see Jonathan play? You never came to any of my games. So it's a thing of like, it's just for her, it feels like his priorities out of whack, that he wants to make it seem like it's all about family, but his thing is all about control, like over her life. It's like, you weren't there for moments in my life. Why are you trying to step in now, you know, and berating like her and Clark about their choices? Because it comes back to that thing. He's like, the military is terrified of you, plus without, and once again, I like that the consequences of him moving to Smallville are felt, because Metropolis doesn't have you flying across the skies all the time. Like, people are noticing you're not around anymore, and also kind of like, you start, you know, if certain crazy stuff starts popping up, people start drawing attention to the fact is, oh, all this crazy stuff started happening in Smallville just when Clark Kent popped in and Superman stopped popping up around Metropolis. But it's the thing of like, obviously he can't be everywhere at once. Even with his super speed, it's still not 100% possible, because it still takes some time. And for him, it's like, you leave it, like a lot of people, it's like, oh, like this particular group, Thaddeus Kilgrave's people, it's like, they are like riling up because they're thinking like, oh, like you're not around anymore. But it was also, like I said, that line of like Sam being like, I keep the balance, where it's like, the military's scared of you. You're like leaning into that whole thing of like, you're this super powerful being that, like, you know, I'm the one that kind of convinces stuff. You're on the good side of things, which is Lois is like, we appreciate that. But Sam is like, you know what, I'm gonna stick around for a little bit, kind of help even things out a bit. But it is kind of a bit asshole-ish of him that he is so controlling that he even kind of gets on Jonathan and Jordan about like, hey, like, your dad, he has a greater responsibility to the world, so don't waste his time. And it's like, because it's like, Clark has a responsibility to the world, and that responsibility is on your shoulders. So like, if stuff comes down, basically hand it on your own, because he has a greater focus that need, you know, at the same, because, and I think this episode is a beautiful showcase of just that juggling everything. Because when it was all said and done, like, Lois obviously isn't able to write the story she wants to write, because Morgan is like basically set it up. So it's like, oh, like if you print anything, like it will go against certain aspects of your contract that would basically, we could sue you into oblivion for. It's like, so obviously she can't, even though like the Smallville Gazette doesn't even have a lawyer of its own, which I'm wondering, is that going to come up at some point in time, get some powerful representation on their side so they can kind of go forward with a lot of stuff. But it's like, the Smallville Gazette doesn't have the manpower to go up against Morgan Edge and his lawyers. So I even love being like, yo, look at this story. It's like debating a first grader. The mayor just keeps bringing up jobs and you're doing this boom, boom, boom. It's like, we're talking big time journalist Lois Lane. When she comes for you, she comes for the throat, dude. She aims for the jugular, dude. So it's understandable, but obviously she's kind of being like pigeonholed again. Like, she's kind of being held, like, restrained. Like, obviously Morgan changed her words before, and now he's threatening her in this regard. And for her ace in the whole of kind of like shutting down this Morgan Edge thing, it's like, get Clark to talk at the, you know, town hall meeting, because being a son of Smallville, obviously Lois is limited, because also it means a lot more coming from him, because, you know, it's like Clark grew up here, this is his home, his family was here, you know, so generations of probably like the Kents were here, so it's like this place holds, you know, if it coming from the golden child to a certain extent of Smallville, then it means a lot. But sadly, you know, Clark is juggling his responsibilities, because obviously it's like, all right, this dude, Thaddeus Kilgrave, we're going to be transporting him. And because, especially if you're not going to be around Metropolis a lot, like, this could easily be someone attacking the prison he's currently at. So we're going to transfer him, which, obviously, that goes according to Thaddeus's plan because he used that as an opportunity to get out. Because apparently he calculated for the fact is, I haven't been seeing Superman recently, so he knew that they would respond by moving him, and he figured this would be his opportunity because it's like, because saying that later on, like, Superman's distracted and it makes him weak. But obviously these distractions are his family. They keep him saying, like, honestly, being Superman 24/7 would take its toll on you. Being able to have that moment, just being able to have some form of a normal life, it's got to be easy. Not easy, but it balances things out because if he didn't have the human element, who knows what he would be if he was just superhero 24/7. Like, you need that human element to keep you grounded. Because sadly, I think, honestly, being Superman would be so much easier than Clark Kent. Clark Kent is the difficult thing in life. Because as Superman, you're like, I'm just saving the day. I'm going to do a hero thing. You can punch most problems. You can use your powers to save the day. Like, most things your powers can compensate for. They can't compensate for the complicated thing of, raising 2 teenage boys, being a husband, like all balancing all that, like wearing the 3 hats he has to wear at the same time and switching between them. It's never the easiest thing, I mean, now he's also the assistant coach too, so you add on like, there's your 4th hat as well, which also plays into one of your other hats because it allows you to keep an eye on your kids. So there's just so much navigating you have to do with Clark Kent that it's like a Superman, it's actually super easy. But like I said, it would still come with its complications because if you're like that 100% all the time, you would probably get a little bit of that like you kind of be in God mode all the time. I know a lot of people don't like the way that apparently Zack Snyder's Superman kind of leans into like making him this like very like godlike figure, but I think I always thought that was an interesting aspect about the Man of Steel movies and just Superman in that continuity is that he is looked at like you are a god amongst men and nothing can stop you. And obviously Supergirl leans into that aspect, and this leans into that aspect too of like these superhuman beings, these gods essentially, and how that worries people. Like I said, that obviously ties into like the military kind of having their worries about Superman and everything, and Sam being the one that kind of eased their minds about it. But if you were like that 24/7, you lose, like I said, that humanity of yours would probably slip away to a certain extent. Like nothing would keep you grounded. You just be in that mode. You'd almost probably borderline into a dictator. And that, I mean, obviously it's interesting because like some storylines of Superman, like, and I think that's probably what happened with the Superman from whatever world Luthor is from. That I think that's what that's potentially implying. Like obviously that's him, that either he lost everything and that's all he had was being Superman. Once again, I feel like they're going with like a bit of an injustice storyline, so it could be a situation of like, like he lost everything and it's like I'm gonna be kind of like the nightmare like I brought up before from BVS, and obviously what they're going to be doing in Zack Snyder's Justice League, as well as that nightmare sequence within that nightmare world where Clark is kind of running things. Now, whether he's being controlled by someone, or whether he's the one that's just completely in control and he's kind of ruling the world with the might of his fist, that's his way of, like I said, running things almost like a dictator, like almost like this totalitarianism aspect, like maybe... that's what I think would happen without the family, without Lois, without Jordan, without Jonathan kind of balancing him out. At least that's how I kind of look at it, which I think is kind of, fascinating. But obviously, like, we had the whole thing with, Thaddeus being prepared for him. I even like to think of, like, I'll be seeing around Big Blue, which I don't know, I like that, kind of being his nickname or whatever. But Thaddeus had prepared, like a sonic weapon, and I was wondering whether or not that was going to have an effect on like maybe kind of damaging his hearing. I mean, more than anyone, he has his super hearing, but I was wondering if that was going to have like long-lasting effects. But I think it was showing you that his family is his strength and not a weakness, because the moment his kids were calling for him, it's like, damn you, I'm on top of this, and he does a super clap and knocks everybody back. It's like, nah, I got this, like that. And that was even interesting too, where that, it's like, oh, I'm glad you dropped by, and I think Clark was saying like, oh, it was as a courtesy. And it's like, oh, yeah, courtesy, how about doing your responsibilities? And it's like, and Clark kind of snapped back at him by being like, I'm here right now, so let's work on this problem together. Like, like Sam was all like, once again, it's that thing of like, it's almost like he feels like he has more of an obligation. It's like, yeah, Lois, you married Clark, but it's almost like he's implying like Clark is his property, which even Clark has to later on let him know, like, he had actually said early in the episode, I don't work for you, Sam. Like, I do this because this is what I want to do. I'm trying to do good. That's at the end of the day. This shouldn't be like, it shouldn't be a thing of like, I have to choose between you. It's like, no, I should be able to do everything, I mean, because obviously, Jordan and Jonathan, well, more so Jonathan, having some issues because obviously him and Tag are kind of on the outside because Tag's arm is messed up because it got messed up at the during the party after the methane, and everything. So his arm got messed up, so he can't be he can't do his thing, and neither can Jonathan. And obviously for Jonathan, it rubs him a little, because it's like. Because Jordan gets all the attention and stuff like that, and I even thought it was actually a cute moment where like they're playing together and Jonathan catches it, but his dad like got behind him and grabbed him. It's like, don't get cocky, until you get across the goal line. He's like, yeah, coming from the guy who runs Mach 10, and obviously he throws it to Jordan. Jordan fumbles. So it's like, well, it's a good thing he's on defense. But obviously Jordan has a little bit of his jealousy just because because for him it's like football's kind of what he had. Like Jordan probably excels in other areas at the very least, but at least that's the conversation he had with Sarah is like, he's been an outsider for so long, so Jonathan is popular, so it's actually kind of okay. It's like, yeah, this is something I'm really good at, It's like, I actually do enjoy football. It makes him feel happy. He's like, I don't even feel my anxiety. But, Sarah says, it's like, well, actually, someone popular like Jonathan, being the outsider, probably is a little harder for him. But I even love that thing of like, it's like, oh, so we like bail your brother out? It's like, let's give him 5 minutes to see if he can turn this around, So it's like obviously seeing the relationship between Jordan and Sarah grow. But there's also the whole Tag situation. Like obviously, you have Jonathan being worried about him, and obviously we see things are going on with him, and I'm like, okay, so what's up with Tag? So obviously he's developing abilities, and they started going wild, and Jordan tried to use his power, like obviously he doesn't have Clark's strength, so he wasn't fully able to hold Tag back, so Tag ended up knocking him back. Luckily they were able to get in contact with their dad, and he was able to kind of take Tag higher to the air to like calm him. It's like the air's a little thinner and up here, but it'll help you calm down. But what was interesting too is it brings up this element of apparently there's a school for those with abilities, because Jordan's blaming himself because he's like, yeah, this is because of the fire, like, because of my heat vision. He's like, I'm the one that gave him abilities and everything, which we'll get to that later. But I thought it was fascinating because he started blaming himself, which Jonathan's like, no matter what happens, you're not to blame for anything. Like, you would never, it was an accident. Like, whatever happened, like, you would never hurt anyone ever, because, Jordan started blaming himself by being like, it's because I have these powers and everything. So, but also, I'll go ahead and talk about it. Like that angle of like, oh yeah, there's a school for superpowered kids. Quickly, Lois and Clark shut that down, where it was like, we're not going to talk about that. It's like, yo, how many kids are out there? And it's like, it's beside the point. I'm like, it must be enough that's probably why they didn't want to tell Sam about Jordan, because they knew that because those kids, regardless of anything, their powers are so out of control. It's probably a thing of they get shipped away and like their family probably barely gets to see them. They probably get treated, sadly, probably more like lab rats than people. So probably very similar to how like the pod kids in Black Lightning were treated, like in season 3 with the Markovian, like how all that was handled previously. I think that's probably like a very similar situation. But like that, the fact that they introduced that concept makes me think, okay, that's probably going to take some interesting turns later on with like Jordan's development of what that kind of potentially means. Like that maybe because his powers are on the lower end, at least so far, that's not really a concern, but Sam might start pushing for that maybe. But even Clark's like, so why didn't you kids call me when I asked, when things are kind of getting bad? It's like, well, and then like Clark went off. He's like, what are you talking about? Like, you telling my kids not to turn to me when it's like, yeah, I might have misspoke. and he's going at him, but it's also like, yeah, like those kids have to bear the responsibility. He's like, the responsibility is mine to balance everything. You don't put that on my kid's shoulder. And Lois just actually had enough. She was like, just stop it. It's like, you were never much of a father, and who are you here to judge Clark, who's struggling every day to balance everything by being Superman, by being Clark Kent, by being a husband, by being a father? You have no right to kind of judge the way he's handling things, because, you know, he's like, you know, you put all this honor and everything crap beforehand. He's like, I chose to serve in the military. It's like, yes, but you could have done both, but you didn't try. So don't shit on Clark for actually trying to do what you never could, you know? And it's like, if you can't get that across your head and kind of accept us handling things the way we are, then you might not be welcome in this family. So he kind of bounces. So I thought that was interesting, because that ties into something I didn't really touch on, and I thought it was actually kind of a very heartbreaking thing to a certain extent. Once again, the balances of relationships, you know, the Kyle and Lana thing, and obviously, like, for Lois, obviously she was counting on Clark, but Clark didn't show up because he was dealing with the whole Thaddeus thing. What I thought was interesting is, like, she was like, no, I get it, I'm not mad. It's like, don't use our thing to check my, like, don't use your super hearing to notice my elevated heart rate or something. He's like, no, when you get mad, you clench your jaw. And it's like, I don't need superpowers to know, like, your little signs. I don't, you know, I thought that was kind of a cute thing, but also it's like, she's like, all right, fine, I am mad, but it's also for her, it's like, I can't be mad because I, you know, it's like, I've known since I knew what I was getting into, what I was dating, when we started dating, you know, missed dates and stuff like that. But for her, it's like, she feels like she's lower on the priorities. And he's like, is that really how you feel? And she's like, right now in this moment, yeah, like, you know, your responsibilities to the world, my dad whispering in your ears, you being there for the kids and everything else. So she feels like she's kind of falling behind. And it's like, once again, it's like, yeah, he's been so focused on the kids, it kind of feels like a thing of like, oh, I'm not there. You know, it's like, when you needed me, I wasn't there. And he's like, I'm apologizing. But it's like, he can't, it's like, because Lois kind of, you know, gripes with, you know, Lana about like, oh, men, all we want to do is like, obviously try and fix the thing. But it's like, sometimes, and just kind of move past it. It's like, it doesn't work like that. But it is a thing of like, and once again, it's that tough thing on Lois. It's like, who am I to complain? I get it. You're Superman. You have an obligation to the world. And it's like, for her, she feels bad about being selfish, that, you know, because that's something they even tackled even a little bit in like I want to say the final season of Smallville, that Lois actually started feeling bad because she was like, oh, like, I'm taking away from you saving other people. Like, is that right? You know, that's the sad guilt of dating, I think, in dating Superman in particular. I'm sure it applies to every other superhero as well, but it's like, oh, like, the time you're spending with me, you could be saving someone else's lives. Like, there's so many people around the world who count on you, who need you, and I'm kind of taking, so I can't be mad, and obviously not, that makes it like, I'm sure that makes you even more mad, because it's like, I'm mad at myself for getting mad about it, but it's, you know, so it's like, that just makes you even more mad, because it just, you're entitled to feel the way you do, but you almost feel like I'm entitled because I'm, you know, because, you know, who am I to be selfish about it? But I think when it comes to the person that you love, wanting to feel like you're important in their eyes, that obviously that they love you, that they're there for you, to have your back, of course, you know, you're entitled to that love. Like, you know, and it's okay to feel the way she does. So, like, I'm not going to fault her for feeling like it's a complicated situation to be in. Like, you know, when you have to, like, not just share your husband. It's not like, oh, like, sharing your husband with your kids, it's one thing. You literally have to share your husband with not only your father, the entire world. That's never going to be the easiest thing, having to share your significant other like that. So I love that they dive into that, because that's such a heavy complexity for their relationship. I don't know, maybe the comics kind of dive into that, but that's never been something that's been so heavily dived into, at least from my experience with a lot of Superman canons, but I'm not well versed in all things Superman out there. So this was just an interesting, like, view into that world of like how complicated that can be. So there's that angle of things, but I really appreciated him being able to you know, have that date night with her, you know, and you know, it's like, you know, I want you to know that you are my love, because I like what they have, these cute moments where it's just kind of like, she's like, Clark, my gorgeous husband, my love, my and it's like kind of buttering it up. It's like, I need a small favor for you. She's like, it's not related to your dad. Actually, no. And that was the whole town hall meeting thing. I also love that whole thing with Morgan Edge, where she was like, your faux British accent, throwing money around as a billionaire con job, and he was like, this accent, this is actually my accent. My accent is genuine. I was actually born, and she was like, oh my God, who cares? I love that she cut him off like that. He was actually about to go and she's like, shut up, no one cares. Like, I like that response. I was like, that's so dope. I think that's the Lois in her, like, I'm not about to listen, like, the journalist in her is what I meant to say. I think that's just the journalist in her, like, cut out the fluff and the bullshit. I see you for who you are. Cards on the table, you know? So, I just thought that was an interesting, development on that front. But what I thought was interesting too is that Morgan Edge was like, yeah, you left Metropolis and everything, and your husband doesn't have a job, and you moved here. Like, obviously you're asking why Smallville is so important to me, why this town is like, why is this town so important to you? Maybe I'll kind of dig up in this. So it's like, yeah, they're gonna have to be extra careful because Morgan Edge is gonna be figuring out, why did you come back to Smallville? Why did your entire family relocate here? What was that all about? So potentially he could be on the verge, not on the verge, but this could later on turn into an aspect of him finding out about Clark being Superman. So there's that. Obviously, they set up some really interesting things with Sam, like what Luther brought up to him the episode before last, in episode 2. Yeah, episode 2. It's kind of resonating with him because on some level, I think for him, it's like he thought as long as he had some control over Clark, it made him not worried. But it's like him not being able to rein Clark in, it's like, well, we got to start on Project 7734. Now, I don't know whether that's them potentially going to try and make a Superman of their own, where it's like, okay, here's someone else that we know we can trust, someone with powers that kind of replace Superman, or whether it's a project supposed to be like, hey, let's start a project that if Superman ever goes wild, we can take him down, we can take care of him, potentially being an angle that they could potentially go with. I think that could represent either or. It could be a combination of both. But it just seems like Sam's starting to kind of see like, you're too powerful, and if you won't listen to reason, we'll find someone else to kind of fill those shoes. Maybe might even start suggesting himself to kind of fill that role in their shoes. We'll see. Or maybe he'll find a soldier that will follow orders, because Clark made it clear, I don't work for you. I'm doing my thing. I'm doing what I think is right. I'm trying to do good in this world, and that's all there is to this. I'm not yours to kind of keep on a leash to do whatever you want to. Obviously, he's trying to make Clark feel like, hey, like, I'm calling Lois to let you know, like, there's a situation going on, but if you choose that you want to, kind of saying, like, okay, like, finding some middle ground. But he's probably going to keep up the appearance of there being a middle ground while operating and doing its own thing. We'll see in the long run what this Project 7734 ends up turning into. It might end up actually being their undoing. I can kind of get that feeling, but we'll see. But another interesting development to this, for one, we find out Morgan's right-hand lady, like, turns out, like, it's not just the heat vision she's got the superhuman strength. So it's like, okay, home dude looked like he only had the superhuman strength, so how much of the powers does she have? Which is interesting, because now we find out, like, why he took an interest in Smallville, because this also ties into Tag's situation. When Jordan heat vision, he thought like maybe something from him transferred over, but it's like it activated some yellow phosphate, and I was like, huh, okay. And he was like, oh, mate. So I was like, oh, did he technically have the metahuman gene already, or is it just kind of a saying like, no, it was like it just activated and made him a metahuman? What that necessarily entails and what that turns into, we'll have to wait and see. But now we find out it's like, oh, there's kryptonite in this place, because we saw at the beginning there was an opening in like 6 years ago. There's all this stuff falling, and it's like it seems like he found a pod. So I'm wondering, like, did those have like kryptonite in them or something? It was something he found 6 years ago that was like falling from the sky. You're like, what the hell was that about? We're still unclear about that, but now. Because at first I was wondering, like, the way they were setting it up because of the whole tag thing. I was like, are they doing the Smallville thing? And it seems like they kind of are. Once again, I was always under the impression, at least what I heard from people, the whole kryptonite angle of Smallville, there being different kryptonite, the whole thing of it giving people abilities, the whole meteor freak thing. Like, I don't think that's something that's typical with Superman canon. The whole different kryptonites either, because that was another thing for Smallville. Like, Supergirl touched on that, I want to say only in season 1. I don't think there's ever been any subsequent, because obviously there's a lot of stuff continuity wise they changed from when the show went from CBS and from season 1 to the show, the CW from season 2 till now. Like, because like, for example, red kryptonite like drives them a little, like, they kind of get, like, they kind of lean more into their, like, it kind of gets rid of their God, what's the phrasing of it? It's it messes with their mind, so they kind of go a little wild. They're no longer like, thinking with their mind and their heart. They're just kind of like, not necessarily raged all the time, but it lowers their inhibitions, I think, is kind of what, they kind of do whatever they want to. Like, I think that's what red kryptonite does. I want to say, like, isn't it like black kryptonite takes away their powers or something like that? So I'm assuming I'm curious like what yellow kryptonite would do to Clark, but also it seems like it has the power to instill people with powers, because Morgan's right hand, it's like, we're looking for volunteers. He's like, oh, we'll find plenty, because there's plenty of people in that town who want jobs, because obviously, there's people who've disappeared, which obviously that led to an issue between Lana and Kyle as well, because it's like, oh, didn't you see the way Morgan made me uncomfortable and you just didn't say anything? Like, is what he's doing for Smallville more important to me? He's like, well, if I yelled at him, if I got up in his face, you would have been mad about that. So, like, Lana walked away. So it's a complicated thing of, like, long-term marriages. They've all been married for a long time, and it's just like, yeah, it comes with its issues, And her and Lois actually kind of talk about it, because, yeah, like, Lois is like, yeah, I might not agree with Kyle, but I know, like, what he does and what he stands for is because he loves this town so much. But then, like, Lana also is like, yeah, I've known Clark for a long time. Yeah, we dated. There were some missed dates and stuff like that. But it's like, when I found out he went to Metropolis, I was like, Clark Kent in the city? What? Because, it's like, she probably figured, like, oh, he'd stay there his entire life. But then she also brought up something interesting where she was like, the moment he came back from Metropolis, he was a different person, a lot more confident, stood up straight, razor sharp. And she's like, I immediately knew you had that effect on him, like that basically you made him the better person that he is. So it's like you two work together so well as a team that there is that obviously, you are so important to him that you made him a better person too. So kind of don't forget that. And I think, it's just, it's a beautiful thing, like diving into their relationship. Like, obviously, because we're getting like their love story down. Like, it's not like with Smallville, we got the beginnings of their love story and what they eventually grew into. It's nice to kind of be like, yeah, this is years into their love story, where it's a thing of like, yeah, we've been married for a while. And she's like, I'm wondering if, like, because of everything else that we keep taking on in our lives, like, is the romance kind of dissipating a little bit. But, still struggling. I think any marriage, super powered or not, would kind of go through that. And so I thought that was kind of, once again, just interesting to bring the real world to Superman, that yes, he might be this all-powerful being, but he's like any other human, like struggling in it, balancing his life, anyway, so I think that's something everyone can relate to. So I thought that was a pretty interesting development. But like I said, I'm so curious to find out what all that stuff at the beginning 6 years was all about. What Morgan's going to do with this X-Kryptonite. Like, can he do it on his own? Because obviously that explains the tag situation with the yellow phosphate. It was a byproduct of, like, there's yellow kryptonite buried underneath Smallville that Jordan, when he blew up that methane, like, it affected tag. Makes you wonder, did anyone else there get superpowers for all we know? So, a lot of really interesting developments. I'm curious to see where things end up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.